Concerto in G for Violin by Antonio Vivaldi. The title of this work is one of a type that we shall encounter again and again in this course. It is a generic title, and it specifies three important details about the work. First, it identifies the genre of this piece. It doesn't identify it specifically. There is more than one type of concerto, as we shall see, but it does tell us that it is some sort of a concerto. The title also specifies the most important note of a composition, something that we need to know in order to determine its tonality. Tonality is a matter that we will address later in this course. Don't worry about it for now. And finally, it tells us the name or the names of the solo instrument or solo instruments in this type of a composition. The last bit of information specified in the title allows us to identify the exact genre of this work. In point of fact, this is a solo concerto because there is only one solo instrument. I probably mentioned earlier that the word solo is sometimes used ironically in music, and here that certainly is the case. Solo means alone, but when we take a look at the performing forces of this composition, you will see that it is not one instrumentalist playing alone. In fact, this composition is performed by the violin soloist, the orchestra, and basso continuo, far more than one instrumentalist. So the word solo in the generic designation, solo concerto, refers to the number of soloists in that type of a composition. You have before you a detailed listening outline for this work, so please take a look at it now. If you take a look along the left-hand side of the listening outline, you will see that it has two types of sections in it, ritornello sections and solo sections. You should have no difficulty hearing these sections when they begin and when they end, because the ritornello sections, as you already know, are performed by orchestra and basso continuo, and the solo sections are performed by the soloist, in this case a violin and basso continuo. Certainly you should be able to tell the difference between an orchestra with accompaniment and one solo instrument with accompaniment. You will also be able to tell the sections apart from each other by the type of notes used within them. The ritornello sections generally have longer, slower notes than those that you will hear in the solo section. In fact, just a few seconds into the first solo section, you will see that the solo violinist is playing notes that are much shorter and much faster than those played by the orchestra in the ritornello sections, and you'll see this again and again throughout the work. Also, take a look at the melodic content of the ritornello. Ritornello, let's take a look at the first section. The opening ritornello has three parts to it: an A section, a B section, and a C section. And when you hear the ritornello, you can hear these three sections clearly. Each one has its own special character. Now, let's take a look at the other ritornello sections in the work, beginning with what is called ritornello 2. Notice that although the first ritornello presents the A idea, the B idea, and the C idea of the ritornello, ritornello 2 presents only the C section of that theme. What we have here is an incomplete repeat of the main musical idea, the ritornello, and thus the word ritornello, which means little return, describes this phenomenon exactly. What we have here in the second ritornello section is a little return or an incomplete repetition of the main musical idea, the ritornello. The same thing happens in ritornellos 3 and 4. Both of them are derived from the B and the C sections of the work, and neither of them states the ritornello in full. Finally, take a look at ritornello number 5. Notice that it presents only the B and the C sections of the ritornello. Again, you have a very clear illustration of what a ritornello is. A little return or an incomplete repeat of something that was presented in full at the beginning of the composition. In fact, we're going to run into compositions again in this course that are ritornello principal compositions. In fact, I'd like to point out something for your information at this point, something that you're not responsible for on the test that you're about to take, but something that you will want to know and to remember when you look at least at one other genre in this course, a couple units down the road, and that is the form of this composition. A ritornello principal work usually has the form that you see specified here, A, B, A prime, C, A double prime, etc. You can see the ritornello sections in the A ideas. A returns in various varied forms, A prime, A double prime, etc. And the solo sections are digressions from it. They're not necessarily related to the main musical idea, so they're called B and C here. Just keep this in mind, and I promise you, you will encounter something of the sort later on in this course. Speaking of seeing things again, the second movement of this work is written in the form of a passacaglia. That is, it has a musical idea that is repeated throughout in the bass. We saw this type of composition in the aria from the Purcell opera Dido and Aeneas. And here we see it in a purely instrumental composition. A passacaglia is a composition in which a musical idea is repeated throughout in the bass, and a melody or melodies unfold above it. It's basically a continuous variation. The form of a passacaglia, or any sort of a variation composition, is A prime, A double prime, A triple prime, etc. The main musical idea keeps coming back, and each time it's presented in some varied form. I promise that you will see a composition of this sort again in this course, so just put this in the back of your mind and you'll be glad that you did later on.